Hey everybody, it's Chris from Holy Trinity, and I'd like to talk to you about the Sunday readings. This Sunday, the gospel is all about waiting. And I wonder if you've ever had to wait a really long time for something. I have too. I'm a pretty patient guy, but sometimes when you're excited about something, it just seems to take forever to finally get there. Some of you might already know this, but I am a big Star Wars fan. I love the movies and I love the stories. In fact, let me show you something. Just right here in my classroom, I've got my Yoda mug, my Han Solo lunchbox, Boba Fett mug, some sand from the movie set, Darth Vader mug, and up there I've got Boba Fett hanging from the ceiling. And over there, I've got Yoda on my angel shelf. Now you might be asking, what does that have to do with waiting? Or what does that have to do with the Sunday readings? Well, check it out. I just happen to know that the very first ever Star Wars movie came out in 1977. I was -3 years old. And the second one came out in 1980. I was born a little later that year. And the third one, 1983. So I grew up with these stories, watched the movies over and over again, stole the action figures from my big brothers and took them in the backyard to make up my own stories. But 1983 turned into 1984, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90. No more movies. Big fans like me had to wait 16 years, 93, 94, 95, 96, for another movie. And it felt like it was never gonna come. It's hard to wait for something that you're really excited about. Now let's go back to the Sunday reading and look at what the people are waiting for. You might remember that a week ago, I introduced you to this guy from the Bible. This guy. The prophet Isaiah. Well, one thing that the prophet Isaiah had promised to his people was that God was not going to forget that they were suffering. He was not going to forget that they were in pain, that they were sad, that they needed help. And Isaiah promised that God was going to send someone, his servant. And the servant was going to take care of God's people on the earth. In this week's Sunday Gospel, Jesus goes into a synagogue and he reads that prophecy in front of all the people in the village. Look at what he says. He came to Nazareth where he had grown up and went, according to his custom, into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. He stood up to read and was handed a scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll and found the passage where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord." Isaiah knew that his people were poor. They worked very, very hard and still didn't have enough to take care of themselves and to feed their families. He knew that some of his people were sick. And he also knew that in that big war with Babylon, many of his people were going to be taken captive and put into slavery. And he promised them that God saw all of their problems and that there was a plan to help them. But they were going to have to wait. Do you know how long they had to wait? 16 years. No. 600 years. The people had been waiting 600 years. Can you imagine waiting for something that long? But look at what Jesus says. Rolling up the scroll, he handed it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all in the synagogue looked intently at him. He said to them, "Today this scripture passage is fulfilled in your hearing." That was the best news ever. Jesus was telling the people that the help they'd been waiting for was finally there, that he was the one. He was bringing help from God down to the earth for them. They didn't have to wait anymore. I remember the day that that new Star Wars movie came out, and I went to the theater and I sat down and I waited for the lights to go down, and then the preview started to play on the big screen. It was so exciting. But it must have been so much more exciting to be there on the day that Jesus said, "You don't have to wait anymore. The love and the help of God has finally come to you." This Sunday's gospel reminds us to never give up on our God, because he always sends help and he always keeps his promises, even if it feels like it's taking 16 years, forever. Until then, know that you have a God that loves you and a church that loves you too. And we'll see you again soon.